Hiya Year 8, hope you're all okay. I'm sure you're all really looking forward to half term, which is obviously coming up nice and soon. We're going to finish this half term with returning to our study of World War One and particularly the events in the trenches and learning a little bit more about something that you touched on in the documentary you were watching for me last lesson, okay, which is called The Battle of the Somme. All right, so we've spent quite a few weeks now looking at why the war ended up in a stalemate. So, why on the Western Front we ended up with 4 years of neither side really getting anywhere. We've had a look at what it was like to be in a trench, to live in a trench, to fight in a trench, and we have a pretty good knowledge of the general overview of what World War One combat was like. What we're going to do today, as I say, is we're going to look at a specific battle, which is the Battle of the Somme. Now, it's one of the most famous battles of World War One. You probably will have heard of it, I would expect, or at least if you ask your parents or people at home, they may have heard of it. It is a really famous event, and it's also a really quite important event for the history of the First World War. And particularly, it's going to help us work towards potentially what your next assessment will be in a few weeks' time. So, today we're going to find out what the Battle of the Somme was, what happened, and we're going to try and answer this question, which is, was the Battle of the Somme a military disaster? Okay, so was it a disaster, or can we say that in some ways it was a success? Okay, so the Somme is in 1916. It's 4 months long. It goes from July to November. Okay, so it's quite a long battle, and it's fought in this area here. So the Somme is a river in northern France, and as you can see from this little map, that's where most of the combat happened. So it was in France, not Belgium, but very close to the border. As I say, it's 4 months long. By the time it's finished, we've got more than 1 million men who are casualties, which means they were either wounded sort of horribly to the extent they can't fight anymore, or they have been killed, which means that actually this single battle, the Battle of the Somme, is one of the bloodiest battles in human history. All right, it's a really, really major, horrible event. In warfare, in human conflicts. So if we break that down a little bit more, British Army by the end of the battle, 4 months in, by November 1916, we've lost 420,000 men, and I'm saying about 60,000 of that number is on the very first day. The very first day of the battle. The first day, someone was killed every 4.4 seconds. All right, it was a really horrible battle in terms of loss of life. Meanwhile, the French lost 200,000 men in total, and the Germans just under 500,000. So, as I say, if you add all those numbers together, you're getting over 1 million casualties, which for one battle and 4 months is obviously pretty horrifying. And what makes it all the more horrifying is that we lost this enormous amount of men, and actually, we really didn't get very much for it. So, the biggest advance we had made by the end of this 4 months was 7 miles. So, if you work that out by looking at the casualty figures, that's about 88,000 men who became a casualty per mile. All right, which obviously is enormous. Crazy sum. So, really horrible battle, and what we need to learn about was it a failure, was it a disaster? Obviously a lot of people died, so in human terms, yes, it was a disaster, but was it a disaster in military terms? And that's what we need to think about today. So, this man here is a man you're going to get to know pretty well over the next couple of weeks, and his name is Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig. So, in 1916, he was the commander-in-chief of the British Army, which means he was the most important commander in the British Army, and it was him that led the army at the Battle of the Somme. Now, as a result of his leadership in that battle, some people call him, even today, some people refer to Haig as the Butcher of the Somme. All right, the Butcher of the Somme, because they think that it is his fault that so many men died and that it was for nothing. Okay, and what we need to figure out as historians is whether that is fair. All right, is it fair to call him a butcher, or can we make excuses for the devastation that was caused? So, Haig had 3 objectives at the Somme that he had to achieve. And your first question is going to be about these, so listen carefully. Okay, 3 things he needs to do. okay, to win this battle. Number one is he's got to draw German forces away from a place called Verdun. And I'll just show you where that is on a map. Okay, so here's our map of France. Okay, there's the Somme up in the north that we just saw, and there is Verdun a little bit further down. As you can see, it's just on that border with Germany. Now, at this time in 1916, the Germans have launched a massive attack, a massive offensive down at Verdun down here, okay, which is where the French troops are based. So the French troops are being absolutely hammered further down in France to the extent that they don't know how much longer they can hold out for. They think there's a pretty good chance that they might be wiped out very, very soon if something doesn't change. And of course, if that happens, the Germans can then sweep in and get further into France and potentially get to Paris, and then it's possible the war could be over. So it's really important that something is done to relieve this pressure. Okay, so these French troops down in Verdun, they desperately need the Germans to be pulled up. Right, we need to somehow get those Germans away from here. So what Haig's going to do, what his plan is, he'll launch an attack up here at the Somme. That will cause the German troops to move to come and deal with him, and that will ease up some of that pressure. Okay, that will ease up some of that pressure on the French troops down here. So that's Haig's main objective. Ease up the pressure on Verdun. And he also, obviously, wants to kill as many Germans as he can, because it's a war, and that's what you do, and try and gain some land if possible. You know, try and gain some territory, push the Germans back. All right, so 3 objectives. Draw the Germans away from Verdun, kill as many Germans as you can, and 3, gain land. Push the Germans back. Remember, the ultimate goal here is to push them right out of France if we can. So the further back we can push them, the better. So the plan that Haig comes up with to achieve these goals is, in the Somme, he's going to do an artillery barrage, a bombardment for a solid week. Okay, that's quite unusual. Now, we've seen bombardments in previous lessons. It's when you use your big artillery guns that you have sort of behind your trenches, and you just fire these enormous exploding bullets called shells at your enemy for a prolonged period. And the aim of that is to try and destroy their defences, obviously try and kill some people if you can, and just generally make them easier to attack. So Haig, he knows that in the Somme, the Germans have been there for a while, so their defences are pretty strong. They've got concrete dugouts, they've got barbed wire, they've got machine guns. They're pretty secure. So what Haig decides to do to try and get over that is make the artillery bombardment last for a solid week. Okay, a full week, no let up, all day, all night, just bombarding those German defences. Okay, to try and break them as much as he can. When that is over, so at the end of that week's barrage, early in the morning, he's going to send the men over the top of their trench. They're going to wander over to the German defences, and of course it's going to be very easy because they've all been destroyed. As you can see, that's the plan, that this week-long barrage will have got rid of any defences there, so you should just be able to walk on in and then continue pushing back, and then hopefully deal with the German sort of train lines where they get their supplies from and their reinforcements from. So it's a wonderful plan, and the idea is, as I say, week-long artillery barrage followed by going over the top. And Haig, he loves a cavalry attack, does Haig, so he's actually hoping that he can send the infantry over, the foot soldiers, and maybe do a cheeky cavalry charge as well. All right, and in theory, that's all going to be very, very easy to do because the defences will have been destroyed, in theory. Okay. So what I want you to do for your first task is I've given you a selection of keywords based on what we've said. So artillery, Verdun, French, wire, trenches, bombardment. Okay, and what I would like you to do is finish these 2 sentences for me. Okay, and I think you should have about 5 minutes to do this. You don't need to write loads and loads, okay, but you just need to summarise these 2 things. So the first one, Haig's objective at the Somme was to. So what was he trying to achieve? Okay, and we've just obviously just been talking about that. And then secondly, what is his plan? Okay, so what does he want to do and how is he going to do it? Okay, and you've got 5 minutes, and then when you're done, start the video back up and we'll quickly have a look at what the answers would have been. And don't forget to try and use all of these keywords down the bottom. Okay, cool. So, this is the kind of thing you should have written. It may not be word for word the same as this, but this is the kind of things you should have included. Haig's objective at the Somme was to draw the Germans away from Verdun. Okay, that's the main thing. The French are being hammered further south. We need to draw the Germans away and relieve that pressure. And the secondary objective is, of course, to push through and gain some more land. His plan to do that was a week-long artillery bombardment to destroy the trenches and defences of the German sort of positions, so to get rid of the wire and things like that. Then troops go over the top, they wander on over, and it's completely unopposed. All right, that was the plan. Unfortunately, as I've kind of already alluded to, the day comes, 1st of July 1916. The men go over at the whistle, 6:30 in the morning, and unfortunately for them, it really does not work as they hoped it would. Okay, so on the first day alone, 60,000 casualties on the British side, one man killed every 4.4 seconds, 37 sets of British brothers, so 37 sets of brothers. Okay, maybe if you've got a brother, that's one set. 37 sets of brothers were killed that one day. All right, obviously horrible, and a lot of that would have happened in the first 10 minutes. And the reason for that is because the soldiers were instructed to walk in a straight line towards the German trenches, because the belief was that there would be no defences left because of the bombardment. You can see this picture here. These are all the spent shells from that week-long bombardment, and therefore they would be fine. Obviously not quite how it worked out. So what you're going to do is you are going to find out a little bit more about the events of this battle and why it went quite as wrong as it did. Okay, so what you have got, I'm just going to open it up on here, is you have got this Word document. I've attached this to show my homework. If you have a look, each bit of the battle is broken into stages. For each stage, you've got a couple of questions to answer. Okay, so what was the plan? How did Haig change the plan? What went wrong, etc. Okay, so it's broken up into nice little chunks, so you just need to do it stage by stage. Okay, you read a little bit, answer the questions, move on to the next one, same thing. Okay, and just work your way through the whole story of the battle. Okay, now I would like you to answer these questions in full sentences. Okay, usual thing. So just to be clear, let's say you were doing this question, summarise the situation after the first day of the Somme. Your answer would begin, after the first day of the Somme, the situation was blah, 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 blah. All right, don't just start with because or of or just write notes. It does need to be a full sentence, please. Okay, now you'll notice that you've got all these different sections, so section 1, section 6, and then the questions are numbered with an A or a B afterwards. Okay, so you set it out like this: 1A, 1B, 1C, and you move on to section 2, 2A, 2B, etc. Okay, so there is a fair bit of reading, all right, but it's nicely broken into chunks, so you do it a stage at a time. Don't try and read the whole thing at once, just do section at a time. Okay, and get those answers into your book in lots of detail if possible. When you've done that, your final task, and I'm going to ask you to post this on Microsoft Teams so that I can read it and maybe give you some feedback in the next sort of couple of weeks, is you're going to answer this question for me. How far do you agree that the Battle of the Somme was a military disaster? Okay, I've given you some sentence starters for this. So basically you've got two options here for your point. In my opinion, the Battle of the Somme should most be remembered as, and you've got a couple of choices, an unnecessary tragedy. So did it need to happen the way it did? Was that completely unnecessary and it just lots of people dying for no good reason? Or a partial success that helped the Allies to win the war? Okay, so did they gain anything from this to the extent that that means that it was actually not quite as terrible a failure as it sometimes is thought of in popular memory? Okay, so as I said, I'd like you to use these sentence starters. You need to support your decision with at least two key facts. Those two key facts you should have in abundance. Should have lots of choices if you've completed that main task with the different sections and the information. So you need at least two pieces of evidence to support it. Okay, and obviously I'll be marking this on Teams, so I will know. So make sure you give me lots of detail. Post your answer on there, and then I'll have a look at it at a future date, probably after half term. All right, I hope all that makes sense. If you get stuck or you need to ask me a question, you can do that either on Teams. So if you just click on the general channel, okay, and write your question in there, then I'll reply to you on that. Or you can send me an email. I'm on my email all day, so I can reply really quickly if you need any help. But hopefully, that should all be relatively straightforward for you. Okay, guys, have a lovely half term. Well done for all your hard work over the last couple of weeks. I know it's a really tricky situation that we're in, but well done for coping with it, and the vast majority of you producing some great work. And I would suggest you all keep an eye out on the mitre, because lots of your work from VE Day is going to be published in there for everyone to see. So well done, everybody. When we come back after half term, I'm hoping probably every couple of lessons to try and get a Zoom meeting with you. So we'll try and do something a little bit more live and interactive every so often when we come back. So keep an eye out on your emails and show my homework for information about that. And I won't set you any work over half term. Please use it to relax, recharge, and come back ready to keep working and do your best afterwards. All right, well done, guys. Have a nice day.